Stop complaining. It's done. The sale went through. Those words shattered my world. My son Daniel stood in my kitchen radiating defiance, arms folded across his chest, completely unmoved by the pain he'd just inflicted. I needed that money for my dream vacation to Greece. I stared at him, my hands still dripping from the sink. Robert's favorite mug trembling in my grip. You sold your father's watch without my permission? Mom, seriously, move on. It's just a timepiece. Just a timepiece. 7 months after burying my husband of 42 years, and my own son had taken the only possession of Robert's I carried with me everywhere. The watch I wound each morning like Robert showed me, feeling connected to him through that simple routine. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Betrayal has a distinct flavor. Sharp, metallic, like copper on your tongue. Standing in my Boston kitchen, facing my 43-year-old son who apparently believed grief had an expiration date, I tasted it completely for the first time. Which shop? I asked quietly. Daniel's wife, Karen, glanced up from her device. Oh good. She's being sensible now. Her tone carried that particular smugness she'd perfected over the years. Honestly, Margaret, clinging to possessions isn't healthy. Robert wouldn't want you stuck in yesterday. Don't tell me what Robert would want, I thought, but held my tongue. Karen had been telling me what Robert would want since the memorial service. Usually when it involved me giving them something valuable. Harbor Pawn on Atlantic Avenue, Daniel said, checking his wrist. An expensive smartwatch that probably cost more than Robert's timepiece was worth. They paid me $700. Not bad for something that ancient. $700 for a 1979 Omega Seamaster that Robert had saved 4 months of overtime to purchase when Daniel was born. The watch Robert wore every single day of our marriage except the day he passed, when the hospital returned it to me in a plastic bag alongside his wedding band. That watch was worth at least $3,000, I stated. Karen scoffed. According to who? It barely even worked. Because I was the one maintaining it, keeping it running, keeping Robert's memory alive in some small way. But they wouldn't comprehend that. Daniel and Karen existed in a reality where everything had a price and nothing had meaning. I'm getting it back, I announced. Good luck with that, Daniel said, moving toward the exit. We're flying out tomorrow at dawn. Karen's been organizing this trip for months. Karen followed him, pausing at the doorway with that false sympathetic expression she displayed whenever she wanted to appear compassionate. Margaret, you should really consider counseling. This fixation on Robert's belongings isn't normal. The door closed with a bang, leaving me alone with the bitter taste of betrayal and the quiet that had become my constant companion since Robert died. But here's what Daniel and Karen didn't understand about their supposedly pathetic old mother. I'd spent 38 years as a financial advisor. I understood the difference between surrender and strategic planning. And I was finished surrendering. The pawn shop matched my expectations exactly. Cramped, dusty, with harsh fluorescent lighting that made everything appear sickly. The man behind the counter had arms covered in ink and the exhausted expression of someone who'd heard every sad story imaginable. You'll hear about the Omega, he asked before I even spoke. How did you know? Your son warned me you might appear. Said you were struggling with letting go. He shrugged apologetically. Look, ma'am, I sympathize. But business is business. I paid fair market value. Fair market value. As if there was a standard price for 42 years of marriage. For the sound of Robert winding that watch every morning while his coffee brewed. For the weight of it in my hands when the hospital nurse placed it there alongside his wedding ring. I'll purchase it back. Whatever you need. The man, his name tag read Danny, looked uncomfortable. It's already sold. Someone came in this morning, paid cash. No returns in this business. My heart dropped. Some stranger was walking around Boston wearing Robert's watch, and I'd never see it again because my son needed spending money for his Italian getaway. But here's something interesting, Danny continued, lowering his voice. We discovered something unusual when we were cleaning it for sale. He disappeared into a back room and returned with a small manila envelope. There was a secret compartment in the case. Real professional work. Must have been done by a jeweler. Found this inside. Inside the envelope was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. In Robert's precise handwriting. Margaret's birthday, August 22nd, 1956. The day I knew I'd marry her. Below that, a series of numbers and letters that resembled some kind of code. FS 3389, BT0822MS. I stared at the paper, my hands trembling. Robert had never mentioned any hidden compartment. In 42 years of marriage, he'd kept this secret, hidden in plain sight on his wrist. You recognize those numbers? Danny asked. I shook my head, but something about them felt familiar. They resembled a password or account identifier. Robert had been meticulous about documentation, always recording important numbers in his careful handwriting. The person who bought the watch, I said suddenly. What did they look like? Danny's expression shifted, became more guarded. Why? Because my husband hid this for a reason, and I believe whoever purchased that watch might be in for a surprise. Ma'am, I really can't. Please. I leaned forward, letting Danny see the grief that was still fresh after 7 months. That watch is all I have left of him. I'm not asking you to break any rules. I just want to know if the buyer seemed aware of the compartment. Danny was silent for a long moment, studying my face. Finally, he exhaled. He didn't say much, but when I mentioned we'd found something inside, he became very interested. Asked if we'd examined it. A chill ran down my spine. Did he provide a name? Paid cash. No documentation required for purchases. Danny paused. But he did inquire specifically about watches that had arrived recently. Said he collected vintage timepieces. Someone had been searching for Robert's watch specifically. But why? And how did they know about the hidden compartment? I thanked Danny and walked back to my vehicle, the piece of paper burning in my purse like a secret I wasn't certain I wanted to uncover. Robert had hidden this for 46 years. Hidden it from me. What else had my husband been concealing? That evening, I sat at Robert's desk in our bedroom, surrounded by 42 years of financial documentation. Robert had preserved everything. Bank statements, tax returns, investment records, all organized in his precise, methodical manner. The code from the watch stared up at me from the piece of paper. FS 3389, BT0822MS. I'd examined every account we owned, every investment, every security box. Nothing matched those numbers. Robert had been financially cautious. Savings account, checking account, a modest pension fund. Nothing elaborate, nothing hidden. Or so I'd believed. My phone rang, interrupting my search. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. Mom, Karen's upset. She says you caused a scene at the pawn shop. I almost laughed. In what universe was attempting to recover my husband's stolen watch causing a scene? I went to purchase back your father's watch. Unfortunately, someone else already acquired it. See. Problem solved. Time to move forward. The casualness in his voice made my chest tighten with anger. This was Robert's son. The baby Robert had worked double shifts to provide for. The kid Robert taught to throw a baseball and change a tire. When had Daniel become this cold? Daniel, there was something hidden inside the watch. Your father left me a message. Silence on the other end. Then, what kind of message? I'm not certain yet, but it resembles account numbers or a password. Mom, Daniel's voice changed, became more alert. What exactly did the message say? Something in his tone made me hesitate. This was the most interested Daniel had sounded in anything related to his father since the memorial service. Just some numbers, I said vaguely. Probably nothing important. Maybe I should come over. help you decipher it. Now I did laugh. Bitter and sharp. Yesterday you told me to stop living in yesterday. Today you want to help sort through Robert's belongings. I'm just trying to be supportive. By stealing his watch. Daniel sighed heavily. Fine. Be stubborn. But don't come to me when you drive yourself crazy chasing phantoms. After he disconnected, I stared at the phone. Daniel's sudden interest was suspicious, but I couldn't determine why. He'd made it clear he considered Robert's possessions worthless sentiment. Unless they weren't just sentiment. I returned to the desk, but this time I approached it differently. Instead of searching for accounts that matched the numbers, I started searching for patterns. Robert had been an accountant before retirement. He thought in systems, in logical progressions. FS could be his initials, Frank Sullivan in the original, but Robert's middle name was Frederick. Robert Frederick. 3389 didn't match any account numbers I recognized. BT could be Boston Trust, where we'd banked for decades. 0822 made me pause. August 22nd, our wedding anniversary. MS was easier. Margaret Sullivan. My initials. The code included my initials. I opened my laptop and started searching. Swiss bank accounts used codes like this. So did offshore investment firms. 4 hours later, I found it. Secure Wealth Management based in the Cayman Islands. Their website was discreet, professional, catering to high-net-worth individuals seeking privacy and security. The account login page required a client number and password. With trembling fingers, I typed FS3389, BT0822MS in the client number field. Valid account number appeared on the screen. Now I needed the password. Something only I would know. Something Robert knew I would determine. I tried our wedding date, our address, my birthday. Nothing. Then I remembered the note. Margaret's birthday, August 22nd, 1956. The day I knew I'd marry her. Not my actual birthday. August 22nd was the day we met. At a summer dance in Boston Common. Robert always said he knew that evening he'd marry me someday. I typed in 082256 and held my breath. Access granted. The screen that loaded next made me gasp. Current account balance, $2,893,471.82. Robert had hidden nearly $3 million from me for our entire marriage. I stared at the screen until the numbers burned themselves into my vision. $2.8 million in an account I'd never known existed. In a bank I'd never heard of. Hidden by a husband who'd spent 42 years convincing me we were living modestly. Every argument we'd had about expenses. Every time I'd clipped coupons or bought store-brand groceries or mended Robert's work shirts instead of purchasing new ones. All of it while he had millions sitting in an offshore account. My first instinct was fury. Pure, white-hot rage at the deception. At the lies by omission. At 42 years of worrying if we'd have enough for retirement while Robert secretly accumulated a fortune. But then I clicked on the account history. The first deposit was made in 1983, 4 years after Daniel was born. $5,000. The notation read, Initial Inheritance Investment, RF. Inheritance. Robert had never mentioned any inheritance. I scrolled through years of deposits. All relatively modest. 300 here, 1,000 there. Regular contributions that explained why Robert had been so careful with our household budget. He hadn't been hiding money from our income. He'd been systematically building something separate. The deposits continued steadily until 2009, then jumped dramatically. Instead of hundreds of dollars, Robert had been depositing $15,000 and $20,000 at a time. The notation on those larger deposits made my blood run cold. Real estate liquidation. Boston properties. Robert had been buying and selling real estate without my knowledge. Properties I'd never seen. Investments I'd never been consulted about. Business dealings that had apparently made him wealthy. How do you live with someone for 42 years and not know they're conducting secret business transactions? I clicked on the account messages and found a folder labeled for Margaret, emergency access only. Inside was a video file uploaded just 2 months before Robert died. I hesitated before clicking play. Whatever Robert had to say about this secret fortune, I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. But I was alone in our bedroom at midnight. My son had stolen the only clue to this mystery, and I was apparently wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. Ready or not, I needed answers. Robert's face filled the screen, looking older and more exhausted than I remembered. He was sitting in his office at work, probably having recorded this during his lunch break. Margaret, if you're watching this, I'm gone, and something's gone wrong. His voice was steady, but his eyes looked sad. I hoped you'd never need to access this account. That we'd grow old together, and I'd eventually tell you about it over dinner someday. He paused, rubbing his face with the same gesture he'd used whenever he was working through a difficult problem. The money isn't mine, sweetheart. It was my father's, hidden away before he died in 1982. He made me promise to keep it secret, to protect it, to only use it if our family was ever in real danger. Robert's father had died when Daniel was 3. I remembered Robert being devastated. Remembered the modest inheritance that had paid off our mortgage. Apparently, there had been much more to it. My father saw what the Great Depression did to families. How quickly stability could disappear. He wanted to make sure his grandchildren would always be protected, no matter what happened. Robert looked directly into the camera, and I felt like he was sitting right next to me. I've been investing the money carefully, conservatively. Every penny is documented. Every transaction is legal. It's grown because I've been reinvesting for 40 years, but the original amount was meant to be emergency money. Insurance against catastrophe. The video continued with Robert explaining the account details, the investment strategy, the legal protections he'd put in place. But I was stuck on one phrase. I hoped you'd never need to access this account. Robert had died of a heart attack at work. Sudden. Unexpected. No warning signs. How could he have known I'd need this money? Unless the catastrophe he'd been protecting against wasn't random. Unless Robert had known something about our family that I was just beginning to understand. The next morning, I called in sick to my part-time position at the community center. For the first time in 7 months, I had something more important to do than organizing donation drives and coordinating senior activities. I needed to understand what Robert had meant by real danger. The investment account had detailed records going back 40 years, but I started with the recent transactions. Robert's last deposit had been made just 3 weeks before he died. $28,000 with the notation, property sale, emergency liquidation. Emergency liquidation. Robert had been converting assets to cash right before his death. I spent the morning researching every property transaction Robert had made. The man I'd been married to for 42 years had apparently been a secret real estate investor, buying and selling properties all over Boston with money I didn't know we had. But here's what made my blood run cold. Every property Robert had sold in the last year had been purchased by the same buyer, a company called Sullivan Properties Group. Sullivan was Daniel's last name too. I grabbed my phone and called my nephew Eric, who worked in real estate. If anyone would know about property transactions in Boston, it would be Eric. Aunt Margaret, how are you holding up? I'm fine, honey. Listen, I need to ask you about something. Have you ever heard of a company called Sullivan Properties Group? Eric was quiet for a moment. Actually, yeah. They've been pretty active lately, buying up properties in good neighborhoods. Cash deals, moving fast. Why? Do you know who owns the company? I can find out. Give me an hour. I spent that hour going through Robert's desk more carefully, looking for any documentation about his real estate dealings. Hidden in the back of his filing cabinet, behind 40 years of tax returns, I found a folder marked insurance documents. But instead of insurance papers, the folder contained contracts, property deeds, and correspondence related to Robert's investments. At the bottom of the pile was a letter that made my hands shake. It was from a private investigator, dated 8 months before Robert's death. Mr. Sullivan, per your request, I've completed the investigation into your son Daniel Sullivan's financial activities. My findings are concerning. Your son has accumulated approximately $195,000 in gambling debts to several offshore betting sites. He's also taken out multiple high-interest loans against his business using fraudulent information about his income and assets. Of greater concern are the inquiries Mr. Sullivan has been making about your estate. He's contacted 4 different attorneys asking about inheritance law and the process for contesting wills. He's also made inquiries about power of attorney procedures and elder care facilities. I believe your son is planning to have you declared incompetent in order to gain control of your assets. The documentation I've uncovered suggests he's been researching this option for several months. I recommend taking immediate steps to protect your assets and ensure your wife's financial security. Regards. Marcus Chin, Private Investigator. My phone rang. Eric. Aunt Margaret, you're not going to believe this. Sullivan Properties Group is owned by Daniel Sullivan. You're Daniel. I closed my eyes, the pieces finally falling into place. Robert hadn't been hiding money from me. He'd been hiding it from Daniel. Every property sale, every cash deposit, every emergency liquidation. Robert had been systematically moving assets out of Daniel's reach. Robert had known his own son was planning to rob us. But Robert had died before he could warn me, leaving only the hidden compartment in his watch as a clue to find the truth. My son hadn't stolen Robert's watch for vacation money. He'd stolen it because he was looking for exactly what I'd found, access to Robert's hidden fortune. And now that Daniel knew I'd found something in the watch, he wouldn't stop until he figured out what it was. I was still sitting in Robert's chair, staring at the private investigator's report, when I heard Karen's key in my front door. She'd had a spare key since the memorial service, ostensibly to check on me when Daniel was working. Now I understood she'd been checking on Robert's assets. Margaret, are you here? Karen's voice echoed through the house, artificially sweet. Daniel and I stopped by before heading to the airport. I quickly shoved the investigator's report back into the folder and minimized the offshore account on my laptop screen. Whatever game Daniel and Karen were playing, I needed to understand the rules before I revealed my hand. In the bedroom, I called back. They appeared in the doorway moments later. Daniel carrying a small suitcase, Karen wearing the kind of outfit that screamed expensive vacation. Her designer sunglasses probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Just wanted to say goodbye, Daniel said, but his eyes were scanning Robert's desk, taking inventory of the papers spread around me. What are you working on? Sorting through your father's things, I said carefully. There's so much I never knew about. Karen stepped closer, her gaze focused on my laptop screen. Find anything interesting? The question sounded casual, but I caught the sharp attention in her voice. These weren't courtesy visits. They were reconnaissance missions. Just old bank statements and tax records. Your father was very thorough with his paperwork. Daniel relaxed slightly. Yeah, Dad was obsessive about documentation. Probably kept every receipt from the last 20 years. Actually, I said, deciding to test their reaction, I did find something unusual. Your father had some kind of investment account I didn't know about. Nothing major, just a few thousand. The change in both their expressions was immediate and unmistakable. Daniel stepped forward, trying to appear casual but failing completely. An investment account? What kind? I'm not sure yet. The paperwork is confusing. I might need to hire an accountant to help me decipher it. Karen exchanged a quick glance with Daniel. We could help you with that. Daniel's good with financial documents. I bet he is, I thought, remembering the private investigator's report about Daniel's gambling debts and fraudulent loan applications. That's very kind. But I already made an appointment with Robert's old accounting firm. They'll know how to handle his investments properly. Daniel's jaw tightened. Mom, those people charge $400 an hour. I can look at the paperwork for free. I can afford $400 an hour, Daniel. The silence that followed was loaded with tension. Karen's mask of concern was slipping, revealing the calculating woman underneath. Daniel was practically vibrating with frustrated energy. We should probably get going, Karen said finally. Don't want to miss our flight. But Daniel didn't move. Mom, about the message you found in Dad's watch. Maybe I should take a look at those numbers before we leave. Just to make sure they're not something important. What numbers? Karen asked sharply. Daniel shot her a warning look. Mom found some kind of code in the watch. Probably nothing, but you never know. Now Karen was fully alert, her vacation excitement replaced by laser focus. What kind of code? I stood up slowly, using my full height to look down at my daughter-in-law. The kind that's none of your business. Karen's face flushed red. Excuse me. You heard me. My husband left me a private message. Private being the operative word. Mom, Daniel stepped between us, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. We're family. There's no need for secrets. Secrets. I almost laughed at the irony. Like the secret gambling debts? Or the secret company you've been using to buy properties with money you don't have? The color drained from Daniel's face. Karen's mouth fell open. I don't know what you're talking about, Daniel said, but his voice was shaky now. Sullivan Properties Group ring a bell? I watched both their faces go pale. Your father knew, Daniel. He knew everything. Karen recovered first, her voice turning vicious. You delusional old woman. You don't know anything. I know your husband owes $195,000 to offshore gambling sites. I know he's been researching how to have me declared incompetent. And I know he's been planning this for months. Daniel slumped against the doorframe like his strings had been cut. The fight went out of him completely. How? He whispered. Your father hired a private investigator. Every lie, every debt, every plan you made to steal from us, it's all documented. I walked to the desk and pulled out the investigator's report, watching Daniel's face as he recognized the letterhead. Robert protected me from you, even after his death. That code you're so interested in? It's the key to more money than you've ever dreamed of. Money that will never, ever belong to you. Karen grabbed Daniel's arm. We need to leave. Now. But Daniel was staring at me with something that looked like respect for the first time in years. He really knew. He knew his son was planning to rob his own mother. What kind of man does that make you, Daniel? For just a moment, Daniel looked like the little boy I'd raised. Confused and ashamed. Then Karen's grip on his arm tightened, and the moment passed. This isn't over, Karen hissed as they headed for the door. Yes, it is, I called after them. It's been over since the day you decided I was worth more to you dead than alive. The front door slammed, leaving me alone with my husband's secrets and the knowledge that the real fight was just beginning. 3 days after Daniel and Karen's dramatic exit, my doorbell rang at 7:30 in the morning. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in an expensive suit holding a briefcase. Behind her stood a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a law school catalog. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm Jennifer Martinez from Martinez, Hayes and Associates. This is my colleague, Stephen Park. We represent your son Daniel in some family legal matters. Family legal matters. That was one way to put it. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. What can I do for you? Jennifer smiled with the kind of practiced warmth that probably cost $400 an hour. Mrs. Sullivan, your son is concerned about your well-being. He's asked us to discuss some options that might be beneficial for everyone involved. Such as? Stephen stepped forward, pulling out a tablet. We understand you may have discovered some financial accounts that your late husband kept private. While we're sure he had good intentions, Managing complex investments can be overwhelming, especially during the grieving process. Overwhelming. As if I hadn't spent 38 years managing financial portfolios for wealthy clients while Robert secretly played real estate mogul. I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. Jennifer's smile never wavered. Of course you are. But consider this. Your son could help shoulder that burden. We've drafted some documents that would give Daniel power of attorney over your financial decisions. Just temporarily, until you've had time to properly grieve. There it was. Exactly what Robert's private investigator had warned about. Temporarily, I repeated. And who determines when my grieving period is over? Stephen exchanged a glance with Jennifer. That would be at your discretion, naturally. Naturally. I stepped back toward my door. I think we're done here. Mrs. Sullivan, Jennifer's voice sharpened slightly. Your son is prepared to file a petition with the court regarding your mental competency. He's concerned about some erratic financial decisions you've been making. What erratic decisions? Accessing offshore accounts. Conducting international financial transactions without professional guidance. To an outside observer, it might appear that you're not thinking clearly. The threat was crystal clear. Sign over power of attorney voluntarily, or they'd have me declared incompetent by force. You know what's interesting about threats? I asked, leaning against my doorframe. They only work if the person you're threatening doesn't have better lawyers than you do. Jennifer's professional mask slipped slightly. I beg your pardon. I said you can tell my son that his plan won't work. Robert left me more than just money. He left me protection. I closed the door in their faces and immediately called the number I'd found in Robert's hidden files. Marcus Chin, the private investigator, answered on the second ring. Mr. Chin, this is Margaret Sullivan, Robert Sullivan's widow. Mrs. Sullivan, I've been expecting your call. You have. Frank told me you might need my services someday. He did. About 8 months ago, Robert asked me to prepare a comprehensive legal defense package in case anyone tried to challenge your competency or your right to his assets. Everything's ready to go. Robert had been 3 steps ahead, even in death. How ready? Mrs. Sullivan, by the time I'm done presenting evidence of your son's gambling debts, fraudulent loan applications, and attempts to manipulate elderly family members, he'll be lucky if he doesn't face criminal charges. For the first time in months, I smiled genuinely. Mr. Chin, I think it's time to make some phone calls. Marcus Chen's office was in a sleek downtown building that screamed expensive legal services. But as I sat across from him reviewing Robert's defense package, I realized my husband had been planning for this confrontation long before he died. Your husband was thorough, Marcus said, spreading documents across his mahogany desk. Bank records showing Daniel's gambling losses. Audio recordings of him discussing plans to have you declared incompetent. Even photographs of him meeting with estate planning attorneys. Audio recordings. Marcus nodded grimly. Robert suspected Daniel was planning something, so he had your house equipped for surveillance last year. Completely legal since it was his own property. I thought about all the conversations Daniel and Karen had had in my kitchen over the past 7 months. Every dismissive comment about my mental state. Every calculation about Robert's assets. Every cruel joke about putting me in a nursing home. Robert had heard it all. There's more, Marcus continued. Robert also discovered that Karen has been systematically isolating you from family and friends. She's been telling people you're becoming senile. That you need supervision. The pieces clicked into place. Why my sister had stopped calling. Why neighbors seemed awkward when they saw me. Why my book club friends had been treating me like I was fragile. Karen had been conducting a whisper campaign, preparing the groundwork for Daniel's legal challenge. How extensive is the evidence? Extensive enough to destroy any competency challenge and probably land them both in jail for elder abuse and attempted fraud. Marcus pulled out a thick folder. But there's something else. Robert left specific instructions about what to do if you ever needed to access the offshore account. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Robert's careful handwriting. Inside was a letter dated just 1 week before Robert's death. My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, then Daniel has shown his true colors, and you've discovered the account I've been building for 40 years. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you about it while I was alive, but I needed to protect it from Daniel until the time was right. The money isn't just an inheritance. It's justice. Every penny came from investments I made using information Daniel thought he was hiding from us. When he started his real estate company, he would brag about his inside deals and guaranteed investments. What he didn't know was that I was listening and investing in the same opportunities with money he didn't know existed. Daniel unknowingly funded his own downfall. Every property he flipped, I bought 3 more in the same area. Every stock tip he mentioned, I invested in with money from our original inheritance. The offshore account exists because I used Daniel's own greed against him. Now it's your turn to use his greed against him. Marcus has instructions to make the account transfers immediately. By the time you read this letter, you'll have financial independence Daniel can never touch. But more importantly, you'll have the power to choose how this ends. You can forgive him. Take care of him despite his betrayal and hope he learns to be a better man. Or you can let him face the consequences of trying to steal from his own mother. The choice is yours, my love. It always has been. Forever yours. Robert. I set the letter down with shaking hands. Robert hadn't just protected me from Daniel. He'd orchestrated Daniel's downfall using Daniel's own schemes against him. Mrs. Sullivan. Marcus was watching me carefully. Are you ready to proceed? I thought about Daniel as a little boy, excited about his first day of school. Then I thought about him standing in my kitchen 3 days ago, calling me a delusional old woman while his wife threatened me. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Mr. Chin, I want you to file every piece of evidence we have with the appropriate authorities. And I want you to do it today. The next morning brought chaos to my quiet Boston neighborhood. I was sipping coffee and reading the newspaper when 3 black SUVs pulled up to Daniel and Karen's house 2 streets over. Men in FBI windbreakers started carrying boxes out of their front door. My phone rang immediately. Mom. Daniel's voice was panicked, desperate. What did you do? I protected myself, I said calmly, watching through my kitchen window as agents loaded computers and filing cabinets into their vehicles. What you should have done for your family instead of trying to rob them. You don't understand. This will destroy us. You destroyed yourselves. I just documented it. Karen's voice came through the phone, shrill and angry. You vindictive old witch. We were trying to help you. By stealing my husband's watch? By planning to have me declared incompetent? By spreading lies about my mental health to isolate me from friends and family? The line went quiet except for Karen's ragged breathing. Robert knew everything, Daniel. Every debt, every lie, every plan you made to rob us. He spent the last year of his life protecting me from his own son. Dad wouldn't. Your father hired a private investigator to document your gambling addiction and your plans to steal my inheritance. He had our house equipped for surveillance so he could record every conversation you had about putting me in a nursing home. I heard Daniel make a sound like a wounded animal. The FBI is seizing your business records because Robert's evidence shows you've been using fraudulent information to secure loans. The IRS is auditing you because you've been hiding income. And the state attorney's office is investigating you for elder abuse. Mom, please. Daniel's voice broke. I never meant for it to go this far. When did it start, Daniel? When did you decide your mother was worth more to you dead than alive? Long silence. When Daniel spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. When I realized Dad had been hiding money from us. I saw some paperwork in his office last Christmas. References to accounts I'd never heard of. I thought if you both died, everything would come to me automatically. The honesty was brutal, but somehow cleaner than the months of lies and manipulation. You were wrong. Robert made sure everything would be protected from you. How much? Daniel asked. How much did he hide? Enough to ensure I never have to depend on family who sees me as a burden. I hung up and watched through the window as FBI agents escorted Daniel and Karen to separate vehicles. Karen was screaming at the agents, probably demanding attorneys and threatening lawsuits. Daniel just looked broken. My phone rang again. This time it was my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. Margaret, I just wanted to call and apologize. Karen told me you were having memory problems, and I believed her. I should have talked to you directly. It's all right, Linda. Karen can be very convincing. Is it true what they're saying? That Daniel was planning to steal from you? I looked at Robert's picture on my mantle, remembering the man who'd protected me even after death. It's true. But it's over now. 4 weeks later, I sat in Marcus Chen's office reviewing the final legal documents. Daniel and Karen were facing federal fraud charges. Their business had been seized, and their assets frozen pending investigation. But that morning had brought an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Sullivan, there's someone here to see you, Marcus's secretary announced. Says his name is William Torres, and he has something that belongs to you. The man who entered was in his 60s, well-dressed, with a kind of careful demeanor that suggested law enforcement background. In his hands was a familiar blue velvet box. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm the one who bought your husband's watch from the pawn shop. I stared at him, confused. How did you know to find me? William smiled and set the box on Marcus's desk. Because Robert Sullivan hired me 20 years ago to protect this watch if anything ever happened to him. I don't understand. I'm a retired federal marshal, Mrs. Sullivan. Your husband contracted me to monitor certain situations. When the watch appeared at Harbor Pawn, I was notified immediately. Marcus was taking notes furiously. You were conducting surveillance on Daniel Sullivan? Among other things. Robert was thorough in his preparations. William opened the velvet box, revealing Robert's watch. But there's something else you need to know about this watch. He turned it over and pressed something on the back. A second hidden compartment opened, smaller than the first. Inside was a micro SD card. Robert recorded everything, Mrs. Sullivan. Every conversation Daniel had about manipulating you. Every meeting with attorneys about declaring you incompetent. Every discussion about what to do with your assets after you were gone. The room spun slightly. Robert was recording Daniel for 19 months. Audio, video, financial records, everything needed to ensure Daniel could never successfully challenge your mental competency or your right to Robert's inheritance. William inserted the SD card into Marcus's computer. The screen filled with folder after folder of evidence. Audio recordings, video files, financial documents, even photographs of Daniel meeting with attorneys and gamblers. Your husband loved you enough to spend the last 2 years of his life building an unbreakable legal defense against his own son. I thought about Robert's final months. How stressed he'd seemed. How many late evening work meetings he'd had. He hadn't been hiding from me. He'd been protecting me. There's one more thing, William said quietly. Robert left specific instructions about what to do if Daniel ever tried to have you declared incompetent. He pulled out a sealed envelope marked Final Instructions, Margaret's Protection Plan. Inside was a document that made my breath catch. In the event that Daniel Sullivan attempts legal action against Margaret Sullivan's mental competency, the following assets will be transferred immediately to Boston Children's Hospital in Daniel Sullivan's name. All property owned by Sullivan Properties Group. All gambling debts and outstanding loans. All legal fees and court costs associated with elder abuse charges. Daniel Sullivan will be personally responsible for all debts and legal consequences, while receiving no benefit from any inheritance or asset transfer. Robert had arranged for Daniel to inherit his own destruction. Your husband was a brilliant man, Marcus said admiringly. He turned Daniel's greed into a legal trap. Robert knew Daniel would never stop trying to get the money, William explained. So he made sure that any attempt to steal from you would result in Daniel losing everything he already had. I picked up Robert's watch, feeling its familiar weight in my hands. For 42 years, I'd thought I was married to a simple accountant who worried about money and saved every penny. Instead, I'd been married to a master strategist who'd spent 2 years orchestrating the most elaborate protection plan in legal history. Mrs. Sullivan, William said gently, your husband asked me to give you a final message if this day ever came. He handed me one last envelope. This one unsealed. Inside, in Robert's handwriting, Margaret, you were always stronger than you knew. I just made sure you'd have the tools to prove it. Love always. Robert. 8 months later, I stood in the lobby of Boston Children's Hospital, watching workers install a brass plaque that read, the Robert Sullivan Memorial Wing. Funded by Margaret Sullivan. Robert's fortune had been more than enough to secure my future and fund the hospital expansion he'd always dreamed about. The final irony was that Daniel's attempt to steal from me had directly resulted in the largest charitable donation in the hospital's history. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Chen. Daniel's sentencing hearing is next week. They're recommending 3 years federal prison plus full restitution. Karen took a plea deal for 22 months. Still want to attend? I typed back, no. I have better things to do. And I did. At 74, I was finally living the life Robert had protected for me. I'd bought a small house near the harbor, joined 2 book clubs, and started volunteering at the hospital 3 times a week. For the first time in decades, I was making decisions based on what I wanted, not what my family expected. My doorbell rang as I was preparing dinner. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman with Daniel's eyes and nervous smile. Grandma Margaret. It's Sophie. Daniel's daughter. I hadn't seen her since Robert's memorial service, when she was finishing college and starting her first job. Karen had made sure to cut me off from the grandchildren along with everyone else. I opened the door. Sophie, what a surprise. I know I should have called first. She was twisting her hands nervously. I heard about Dad and Karen. About what they did to you. I wanted to apologize. You have nothing to apologize for. I do though. I knew something was wrong. Dad kept asking weird questions about Grandpa Robert's finances, and Karen was always making comments about your memory. I should have said something. I studied my granddaughter's face, seeing Robert's honesty there along with Daniel's features. Come in, sweetheart. Let's talk. Over dinner, Sophie told me about her new job teaching high school English, her engagement to a young architect, and her guilt about her father's crimes. I keep thinking I should visit him in prison, she said. But I'm so angry about what he did to you. Anger is normal. But Daniel is still your father. How can you not hate him? I thought about Robert's letter, about the choice he'd given me between forgiveness and justice. Because hate would mean he still had power over me. I choose peace instead. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. I missed you so much. Karen told everyone you were getting confused. That you didn't want to see us anymore. I never stopped wanting to see you. And I never will. As Sophie helped me clear the dishes, she paused at Robert's photo on the mantel. I always wondered why Grandpa Robert wore that watch every single day. He must have really loved it. I smiled, thinking about the 2 hidden compartments, the offshore account, the elaborate protection plan that had saved my life. He loved what it protected. That night, after Sophie left with promises to visit every week, I sat on my back porch watching the sunset over Boston Harbor. Robert's watch was on my wrist, keeping perfect time. He'd been gone 15 months, but somehow he was still taking care of me. The greatest love stories aren't about passion or romance. They're about protection. About someone loving you enough to fight battles you don't even know you're facing. Robert had spent 2 years preparing for a war I never saw coming, ensuring that his death wouldn't leave me defenseless against his own son's greed. Some people spend their whole lives looking for that kind of love. I was lucky enough to wear it on my wrist for 42 years. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.